Mantrapushpam word to word meaning and commentary. Introduction to Vedas. To briefly see into the genesis of the Vedas. Number 1, the universe is reverberating. When there is reverberation, there is sound. In other words, the entire cosmos is simply a manifestation of sound energy. The ancient Vedic sages, through penance, were able to download cosmic data, information of the cosmos directly. They received the cosmic truths in the form of sounds which they heard and envisioned, which they received in a series of sounds. And these truths were recited as received and passed on generations after generations. Various truths downloaded by various rishis gave rise to the ocean of the Vedas. Veda Vyasa later compiled these Vedas and classified them. This is how the 4 Vedas came to existence. Each of these Vedas have many branches. Each branch had 4 components: the Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishad. Mantrapushpam comes in the Taittiriya Aranyakam of the Krishna Yajur Veda. So let us look at the first verse. Om Yopam Pushpam Veda Pushpavan Prajavahan Pashuman Bhavati. So word to word meaning. Number 1, Yaha, which means whosoever, Apam, which means waters, Pushpam, which means nourishing and blossoming like that of a flower, Veda, which means to know, Pushpavan, which means full of flowers, Prajavan, which is full of progeny, Pashu Man, which is full of cows, and Bhavati, which means to become. So the commentary. The literal meaning here is when one realizes the flowers of water, he becomes full of flowers, progeny and cows. The Mantrapushpam comes as a part of the Aruna Prashna, which speaks about the interrelation between the elements and nature. So this mantra denotes the importance of the essence of water. One who realizes the importance of the life-nourishing and blossoming aspect of water attains wealth in the form of progeny, prosperity and cattle. We should also look at how flower is seen as something which blossoms from water, as something which is born out of water. So the essence of water is represented as flower. This is historically evident as we look at the ancient civilizations which reached its peak when people settled near rivers. The Vedas have many dimensions of truth to them, so let us look at a profounder meaning than what we have just seen. Pushpam can refer to any aspect which blossoms and nourishes. The root sound push means to nourish. In the Vedic tradition, water is seen as a synonym to the state of absolute reality, which can be interexchanged with other terms like absolute consciousness, God, Godhood, Atma, Paramatma, anything. And in fact, the word Narayana literally means one who has waters as his abode. It comes from the breakdown of Naraha, which means water, and Ayanam, which means abode. Water best represents the state of Godhood or Atma or absolute reality. See, water can be in the form of a wave, like the wave of consciousness, which is all pervasive. Water is beyond attributes and colors. Water can adopt the color in which you expose it to. Put water in a red bucket and it becomes red. So this is an analogy to the state of Godhood as an incarnation within humans appears human. He can come as a human when incarnated into a human civilization. He can come as a fish when descending into a fish kingdom. Water is also beyond form. Yet water can take any form it wants. Put it in a square container and it takes a square form. This is an analogy to the state of Godhood. Upon incarnation on the planet, an avatar abides by the law of earth, be it gravity, aging, health, nourishment, whatsoever. Water can also be calm as Sadashiva, or it can come ferociously crashing like a waterfall as Rudra. So one who realizes the nourishing blossoming aspect or essence of Atma or the absolute consciousness attains fullness of blossoming property, cattle and progeny. Cattle here refers to wealth. Progeny refers to the continuity of genetic makeup or knowledge to the next generation. Progeny does not merely refer to having children. Progeny is created when you initiate someone into knowledge, making sure that a particular lineage is maintained. The next mantra. Om Chandramava Apam Pushpam Pushpavan Prajavan Pashuman Bhavati Ya evam Veda Yopam ayatanam Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati. Chandrama, which means the moon, Vai, which means verily, Apam, waters, Pushpam, flowers, Pushpavan, full of flowers, Prajavan, full of progeny, Pashuman, full of cows, Bhavati, to become, Yaha, which means whosoever, Evam, which means in this manner, Veda, which means to realize, Yaha, which means whosoever, Apam, which means waters, Ayatanam, which means abode, Veda, to realize, Ayatanavan, meaning to merge back to the abode, Bhavati, which means to become. So now the commentary. The literal meaning to this is the moon is verily the flower of the waters. One who realizes this is blessed with flowers, cattle and progeny. One who knows the abode or source of water attains that abode. If we look carefully, the moon and waters are closely related. The moon's gravitational force pulls the oceans to cause tides. The high and low tides are influenced by the waning and waxing of the moon. So one who understands the nature of the sea in accordance to the waning and waxing of the moon can safeguard his properties and people from floods. This knowledge verily enables him to accrue wealth, progeny and prosperity. One who realizes the abode of water attains that abode. In a profounder understanding, the moon is a representation of the mind. The Vedas, particularly in the Purusha Suktam, we find a verse which describes the moon as having born from the mind of the cosmic person. In the verse that goes, Chandrama Manaso Jataha. The mental activity relies on the waning and waxing of the moon. This is why Hindus use specific tithis to perform specific sadhanas. For example, a full moon hypes the mental state. If you are meditative, your experience heightens during full moon. This is why you also notice patients under psychiatric conditions showing signs of exaggerated aggression perhaps during full moon days. The state of Atma or absolute reality, which is represented as water in the Mantrapushpam, because the mind can be utilized for spiritual awakening. One who achieves this attains enlightenment, which is referenced by the verse, one merges back to the abode. What the mantra means by one merges back to his abode is realizing his true state as Atma or absolute reality or consciousness. In fact, let us take a glimpse from the Narayana Suktam of the Krishna Yajur Veda in Taittiriya Aranyakam. There's a beautiful mantra which goes as Narayana Paro Dhyata Dhyanan Narayana Paraha, which simply means the one who is meditating upon Narayana is verily Narayana. The next mantra, Agnirva Apamayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati योऽग्नेरायतनं वेद आयतनवान् भवति आपो वा अग्नेरायतनम् आयतनवान् भवति य एवं वेद योपमायतनं वेद आयतनवान् भवति. Agnihi, which means Lord Agni, Agni Bhagavan, Vai, which means verily, Apam, which means waters, Ayatanam, which means abode, Ayatana Van, which means mergence back to the abode or source, Bhavati, which means to become, Yaha, which means whosoever, Agnehe, which means from Agni Bhagavan. So commentary, at a literal level, this stanza reveals fire as the source of water. One who knows the abode of fire attains that abode. Verily, water is the source of fire. One who realizes this attains that abode. One who realizes the abode of water attains that abode. So let us look at a reference from the Taittiriya Upanishad of the Yajur Veda. We have to look at the second chapter of the Upanishad, which is the Anandavalli. So the verse which goes Tasmad va etasmadatmana akashas sambhutaha. This simply means from Atma came ether or Akasha. Akasha is often misinterpreted as space, but it is the right English terminology would be ether, and we will look at what ether means. And we have other mantras which follows Akashat Vayuhu Vayoragnihi Agnerapaha Adbhyaf Prithvi. So these mantras further expounded from ether, which was born out of Atma, emerged Vayu, air, and from Vayu arose Agni. From Agni arose water, and from water came earth or Prithvi. We even have the genesis described in the Vedas. For this, we have to look at the Purusha Suktam. A similar truth is also expounded here in the verse of the Purusha Suktam. Adbhyas sambhutaf prithavyai acha. This verse talks about how Atma, or the absolute reality, at the initiation of the observable or the material universe, took form of ether. To give another analogy, when we see pure energy being condensed, it forms matter. So the subtlest form of matter is ether. Ether or Akasha then further condenses to form air or Vayu, which then further condenses to form Agni, which then further condenses to form water, to further condense into earth. So we can see this sequence as something which is going from the subtlest aspect to the most gross aspect. This whole work of subtleness to grossness is expounded in the Vyahartis of the Vedas. In the mantra Om Bhur Bhuvassuvaha, Bhuhu, which is the grossest manifestation, and Swaha or Suvaha is the subtlest manifestation. So how is Akasha subtlest and earth the most gross? Let us look. Akasha is a manifestation which can be only perceived in the form of sounds. The Vedas were downloaded as cosmic sounds which reverberate as the cosmos. So the dimension of this network of vibration is Akasha. The Akasha is the cosmic archive that houses all information of the cosmos as sounds. And this explains why the Vedas were downloaded in the form of sounds which are mantras. Vayu. Vayu can be perceived through sound and touch. So Vayu is slightly more gross than Akasha, because while Akasha can be only perceived through sound, Vayu has another component to it, which is touch. Vayu further condenses to Agni. Agni Bhagavan can be perceived through sound, touch and form. So Agni is the first of the elements to have a form. Water can be perceived through not just sound, touch and form, but also taste, rasa. So Vayu can be, the additional component for Vayu is touch, sparsha, Agni is rupa, water is rasa, taste. And finally earth. Earth can not only be perceived through sound, touch, form and taste, but it also has gandhaha, smell. So in the Upanishad, the Surya Upanishad of the Atharva Veda, we find a verse that beautifully goes as Adityo vai shabdasparsha rupa rasa gandhaha. Here Surya Bhagavan, and in the Upanishad, Surya is verily referred to as the Atma, our Atma, or an absolute reality. So he is said to be the very manifestation or the source for Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa and Gandhaha. Now coming back to Mantrapushpam, this stanza reveals the truth. The stanza that we saw reveals the truth of fire being the source for water and vice versa. So how is this so? From the Upanishad, we understand that it is the same Atma, same absolute reality, which is expressing in different densities as the 5 elements. So in real, the essence to all 5 elements is one. We notice water being the source for fire when we observe lightning arising from the water clouds. Vice versa, the fire of digestion takes form of water in the digestive juices of the alimentary canal. In a profounder dimension, the absolute reality, which is represented as water in the Mantrapushpam, becomes the source for fire. I explained this using the verses of the Upanishads and Purusha Suktam earlier on how fire is a result of consolidation of the absolute reality. Fire in the form of inspiration or knowledge drives one to seek the truth of the self to experientially realize the Atma. Thus, fire here becomes a source to enlightenment, the abode of absolute reality symbolized by water. As per the Vedic culture, Lord Agni is manifest not just as fire but as also the inner energy, momentum and inspiration. Let us look at the next mantra. Vayurva apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yo vayorayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai vayorayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam veda yopamayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati. Word to word commentary. Vayuhu, which means Vayu Bhagavan, Vai, which means verily, Apam, which means waters, Ayatanam, which means abode, Ayatana Van, mergence, meaning going back to the abode, Bhavati, which means to become, Yaha, which means whosoever, Vayoho, which means from Vayu, Veda, which means to realize. So commentary. At a literal level, this stanza proclaims Vayu for being the source of water. One who realizes the abode of Vayu attains that abode. Likewise, water is the source for Vayu. One who realizes this attains that abode. One who knows the abode of water attains that abode. We can take an example of air condensing to form solid water. You see this during the formation of dewdrops. Vice versa, water evaporates to form vapor, thus being a source to Vayu. In a profounder level, Vayu in the form of prana or life force can be utilized to attain self-realization. Every sadhana involves the utilization of life force. In Vedic Samskrita, one definition for Rudra is life force. When life force exceeds the body, a body drops down as corpse. A corpse is surrounded by people who weep and mourn. This is one reason why Rudra is described as he who causes one to weep, because he is the manifest life force. So when we concentrate our prana and utilize it in an intelligent way, it can pave way towards enlightenment. Thus, here Vayu in the form of life force becomes a gateway to the state represented by abode in the Mantrapushpam of the absolute reality. Absolute reality is represented by water in the Mantrapushpam. Next mantra. Asau vai tapannapamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yo mushyatapata ayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati apo va amushyatapata ayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam Veda Yopam Veda ayatanavan bhavati. Word to word meaning. Asau meaning having a particular state. Vai, which means verily. Tapan, which means the property to cause heat. Apam, which means waters. Ayatanam, which means abode. Ayatana van, which means mergence back to the abode. Bhavati, which means become. Yaha, which means whosoever. Amushya, meaning whoever with a particular state. So whoever who has a particular state. Which state? It's not specified. Tapataha, which means heating, to heat something. So commentary, at a literal level, this stanza states that the source of heat is the source of to the water. One who realizes this attains that abode. Vice versa, water is the source to the source of heat. Yes, meaning a source which produces heat. So water is the source to something which stays as a source to heat. One who realizes this attains that abode. One who realizes the source of water attains that abode. So we see this in the reality in the form of the scorching sun, which is responsible for the water cycle. Water in the form of rain is possible only due to the heat produced by the sun. Vice versa, water at a peak temperature becomes a source for heat. We see this in the form of hot springs and volcanic eruptions. At a deeper understanding, heat in the form of tapas or penance paves way towards enlightenment. Enlightenment, which is this state of absolute reality. One who realizes this attains the abode of enlightenment. In fact, tapas comes from the word tapta, which means heat. Penance is the manifestation of the spiritual heat. By the same token, absolute reality, which is represented by water, is the source for heat. It is the internal Atma which is responsible for the inner heat which sustains our being. The Narayana Sukta of the Yajur Veda beautifully describes this. With the verse that goes, Santapayati svandehamapadatalamastakah tasya madhye vanhi shikha aniyor bhavyavasthitaha. So this mantra means that at the center of the spiritual heart is placed the Atma of atomic size facing upwards and which is fiery in nature. This heats up the body completely and equally from top to toe. So commentary, this whole sukta, Narayana Sukta, speaks about the anatomical location of the Atma in the body, and this verse that we just saw specifically describes the Atma as the powerhouse which heats and empowers the body by supplying heat. The next mantra. Chandramava apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yaschandramasa ayatanam Veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai chandramasa ayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam Veda Yopam Veda ayatanavan bhavati. Chandrama, which means the moon. Vai, which means verily. Apam, which means waters. Ayatanam, which means abode. Ayatana van, which means mergence with the abode. Bhavati, which means becomes. Yaha, which means whosoever. Chandramasa, which means from the moon. Ayatanam, which means abode, and Veda, which means to realize. So commentary. In a superficial aspect, the Vedas proclaim the moon as a source for water through this mantra. We already saw the significance of moon and water in the earlier verses. So one who realizes the abode of the moon attains that abode. In parallel, water is the source for the moon. This is what the mantra speaks. The earth, as we know, comprises 70% water. The moon was formed when a celestial body with a similar size to mass collided with the Earth nearly about 4.5 billion years ago. The impact generated intense heat, causing both the Earth and the colliding object to partially melt, and a considerable amount of debris was ejected into space. And over time, debris eventually aggregated and formed the Moon as a natural satellite to the Earth. Now coming to the deeper view of the mantra. In a profounder aspect, the mind is a source for the absolute reality. One who gains mastery over the mind and goes beyond it is established in the state of enlightenment. The very absolute reality, on the other hand, is the source to the moon as well, as it condensed to form consolidated celestial bodies like the moon. Next mantra. Nakshatrani va apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yo nakshatranam ayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai nakshatranam ayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam veda yopam ayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati. So let's look at the word-to-word meaning. Nakshatrani, which means constellations of stars. Vai, which means verily. Apam, which means waters. Ayatanavan, which means mergence with the abode. Bhavati, which means to become. Yaha, which means whosoever. Nakshatranam, of the constellations. Ayatanam, which means abode, and Veda, which means to realize. At a literal context, the stars are the source for water. One who knows this attains the abode, meaning the source or origin of the stars. Verily, water is the source to the stars. One who knows this attains that abode. One who knows the abode of water attains that abode. The changing seasons are linked with specific patterns of the star constellations. In the ancient times, the appearance of the Orion constellation marked the beginning of the rainy season. Even today, astronomers rely on star constellations to locate certain celestial bodies like the comets and asteroids that may contain water. Recently, numerous space missions have been launched to investigate celestial objects within our solar system, including the Moon and the Mars, in search of water resources. Some of these missions have utilized data which was obtained from star constellations to help locate their intended targets. So water becomes a source to the constellation. The constellations come to use for seagoers for navigation. At a deeper context, the constellations become a source for one to be established in the Atmic abode. The constellations play a very important role in the Vedic culture in determining one's life destiny and his or her tendencies. This includes the tendency to seek or move towards self-knowledge. Our auspicious days in the Hindu calendar are also based on the constellations, which again become a source to our emergence into the absolute reality. Vice versa, the absolute reality becomes a source to the constellations. The stars are present in the form of gaseous substance, which is simply a consolidated form of the absolute reality. As we saw in the Upanishad earlier, from absolute reality becomes Akasha, Akasha to Vayu. So the gaseous state of these stars, constellations, are in the form of Vayu, which is nothing but a consolidated form of the absolute reality. Thus here absolute reality becomes a source for the constellations. Next mantra. Parjanyo va apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yah parjanyasyayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai parjanyasyayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam veda yopamayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati. The word-to-word meaning. Parajanyaha, which means the rains. Vai, which means verily. Apam, which means waters. Ayatanam, which means abode. Ayatanavan, which means mergence with the abode. Bhavati, which means become. Yaha, which means whosoever. Parjanyasya, meaning of the rains. Ayatanam, which means abode. Veda, which means realize. The literal meaning to this stanza is on the rain being a source to water. One who knows the abode of rains attains that abode. Also, water is the source for the rains. One who knows this attains that abode. One who knows the abode of water attains that abode. Now, rain literally pours in the form of water, which later fills up the water bodies, thus being a source to water. It is the evaporation of water bodies like the oceans which form rain clouds. Thus, water acts as a source to rain. The deeper meaning to this is Indra is the source for absolute reality. Absolute reality, again, as I keep mentioning, is represented by water in the Mantrapushpam. That is why we have a repetitive verse which comes at the end. Yopam ayatanam Veda ayatanavan bhavati, which means one who knows the abode of water attains that abode. So one who knows the source of absolute reality attains enlightenment. Coming back, Parjanyaha is another name for Indra. He is the bringer of rain. As we saw earlier, Lord Indra is the aspect of the self which gains mastery over the senses. Indra Bhagavan is sometimes portrayed as a bhogi, meaning one in pleasure, in the Puranas, because the pleasures are only experienced with the five senses. We use the five senses to experience creation. One who gains mastery over the senses attains the state of Indra. He stands like a king, just like Indra Bhagavan. The play of creation can no longer affect him. He becomes a master to it. Therefore, we call Indra as the king of the Devatas, the Devaraja. The Krishna Yajur Veda beautifully portrays this in the Taitiriya Aranyakam, in the mantra which goes Mayi Medham Mayi Prajam Mayi Indra Indriyan Dadhatu. So this mantra speaks about the aspect of Medha, or the power of memory retention, or the power of intelligence associated with Indra. The aspect of intelligence granted by Indra is the mastery over the senses, which is Indriyam. The aspect of intelligence granted by Indra is the mastery over the senses, Indriyam, or the blessings of a perfectly functionable sense organs in one. Mastery over the senses enable one to attain enlightenment, hence to be established in the state of absolute reality. Absolute reality becomes a source to Indra because it is that consciousness which is manifest as Lord Indra. Next mantra. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yas samvatsarasyayatanam Veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam Veda yo sunavam pratishthitam Veda pratyeva tisthati. So word to word meaning. Samvatsaraha, which means the year or season. Vai, which means verily. Apam, which means waters. Ayatanam, which means abode. Ayatana van, which means mergence with the abode. Bhavati, which means become. Yaha, which means whosoever. Samvatsarasya, of the season or year. Veda, which means realize. Apsu, which means waters. Navam, which means both. Pratishthitam, established. Pratyeva comes with prati, which means reaction, and eva, which means in the same manner. Tishthati, establish. So literal meaning, time in the form of years and seasons is the source for water. One who knows the abode of time attains that abode. Water is also the source to seasons. One who attains this attains. One who realizes this attains that abode. One who knows water and the boat that is established on the water surface is able to establish himself on the boat. The seasons according to the year meaning time, is the source for water body when it causes regeneration of the water cycle and flow of rivers. Likewise, water influences the seasons. For instance, the oceans and the movement of water in them affects the temperature and how much rain or snow there is in different regions or parts of the world. When water evaporates from oceans and other water bodies during summer, it can lead to more rain. But during water, there is less evaporation, which leads to less rain. Snow and ice cover also affect the timing and length of seasons, especially in cold areas. At a deeper context, time is the source for the absolute reality. The evolution of a soul along the timeline of various births ultimately leads him to enlightenment. In this way, with time, one inevitably attains the abode of Atma. The absolute reality becomes a source for time in the form of Kala, who is manifest in the form of deities like Kala Bhairava. And these are the deities who are worshipped for time-related issues or time management. The boat is the guide which enables us to cross the ocean of illusion towards the abode of enlightenment. One who captures this boat, and this boat can come in the form of a deity or a guru, is well established and saved. The Durga Suktam of the Krishna Yajur Veda describes Agni Bhagavan as the boatman who ferries us across the ocean of illusion. In the Taittiriya Aranyakam, Om Sanaf Parushadati Durgani Vishwadave Vasindhundurita Tyagnihi, meaning, O Agni Bhagavan, like a boat, carry us across this extremely difficult to cross ocean of illusion of this creation and bring us to reality. Final mantra. Om Rajadhirajaya Prasahya Sahine Namo Vayam Vaishravanaya Kurmahe Same Kaman Kama Kamaya Mahyam Kameshvaro Vaishravano Dadatu Kuberaya Vaishravanaya Maharajaya Namaha. Word to word meaning Rajadhirajaya, Raja Adhirajaya, the king of kings. Pra, which means Prakatita, which means manifest. Sahya Sahi Ne, which means providers of all victories and strength. Namaha, which means not me. Now there is a misconception that Namaha means salutations. So Namaha literally means Na and Maha, not me. So by uttering Namaha, we disidentify ourselves from all illusions. Our identification with the body and mind, which is the illusion. Ultimately, we become empty and realize that we are verily Atma. Vayam, which means we. Vaishravanaya, Vaishravana, meaning the one who listens to our prayers. Kurmahe, the meaning of Kurmahe is something which we do. Saha, which means he. Me, which means for me. Kama, which means desire. Kamaya, desires. Mahyam, which means to me. Kameshvaraha, which means the Lord of desires. Vaishravanaha, okay, Vaishravanaha, it's another name for Lord Kubera. Dadatu, which means to provide. Kuberaya, which means Kubera. Maha, which means great. Rajaya, which means king. And Namaha, as we had seen earlier, it means not me. Okay, one important point to note here is in the Veda Samhita, this mantra, Om Rajadhirajaya and so forth, and does not come as a continuation to the other mantras of the Mantrapushpam we saw. This particular mantra comes as an independent stanza elsewhere in the Taittiriya Aranyakam. Nevertheless, the commentary, O kings of kings, you are the provider of all victories and strength. Namaha to you, O Kubera, bless me with wealth and fulfill my desires. Namaha to Kubera, the Vaishravana, the Maharaja. This stanza is commonly recited during Deeparadhana to a deity. It glorifies the Lord Emperor who would listen to our prayers to provide us with abundance and wealth. See, and karma as desire doesn't come under a negative projection. The world functions with desire or karma. You need desire to even eat, walk, drink and carry out your life. Even the impulse to get up from bed every morning is desire. And therefore, Devi herself, who empowers the cosmos, stands as Kamakshi in Kanchi. And we also have Lord Shiva, who stands as Mahakameshwara in a temple in Agra. Thank you for watching.